someone says, "What's a death doula?" It's like, it's going to take me like 60 seconds to define it. And even then, I'm going to do a horrible job of summarizing what it is because it's 18 different things at once. Sometimes I'm making calls to find a place for someone to live because they're not well enough to live at home because they can't go up and down stairs, but they don't want to move into a nursing home, but they don't want to die at a hospital. So I'm like calling different places, seeing where can we get them into a place where they feel at home without being at home. Sometimes it's me talking about, do you want to use medical aid in dying because you live in a state where that's legal? And then I'm going, I don't think that's legal. You can't do that. And me saying, you live in a state where you can do that. And then really being with people in the layers of things that they'd never thought of, things they're afraid of. It's really beautiful work and it's never the same.
Hi, we're Jamie and Joan, two humans and bodies who take care of bodies for a living.
We created this podcast as practical medicine for bodies living through this disembodied time.
We want to invite you to come sit with us and experience the beautiful, loving, complex person that is your body. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. The secret here is that we've already been talking for almost 2 hours, but this is now, because of the magic of editing, the beginning of this episode, even though it is the end of our recording session. And we are recording this here at the end because we just had an absolutely incredible conversation with our friend Caroline Lee about all things death. And it was so good and so juicy that we decided we wanted this conversation to take up the entire time of this episode. So we're going to deviate a teensy bit from our typical format of our check-ins and our communication about the way we've been experiencing our anatomy, and instead just kind of send it right over to now past us, who had this just incredible conversation with Caroline. So that's what we're doing here at the top of the episode.
Yep. What I'll just name is right now in my body, I am experiencing some sleepiness because it is at/past my bedtime because of how wonderful that conversation was. But also, like, I'm just feeling deeply like enthralled and inspired and in love with my body and the fact that she is so intelligent and is going to die someday. And all
she
those
knows
things.
Exactly how to do it.
She knows how to do it. Like, I just feel so full from the conversation with Caroline. So I'm so excited for everyone to be listening. And I hope you find it as moving as I did.
Yeah, I'm so with you. Today was a travel day for me in this back and forth to Nashville, and they've started to become really enjoyable and quite smooth just because I have decided that they're going to be.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I am waking up on these travel back to Washington days. I'm waking up at 2:30 in the morning, what ends up being local time. So yeah, I'm with you in I'm tired and I feel so enlivened at the same time. And so, yeah, I'm excited for everyone to hopefully feel a similar way at the end of this conversation. I feel like it's a good sign that as tired as we are here at the end of almost 2 hours of talk time, we are feeling more present, more tuned in to the brilliance of our bodies than we were before we started that conversation. And that's what we hope for most around here. So without further ado, who do we have here with us today for our very first guest episode on experiential anatomy?
I'm so excited. As someone that until this very conversation, I have not ever met, but I feel like I already know because of stories that Jamie has told me. Caroline, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. I'm Caroline Lee. I live in the Bay Area. I was in LA for 10 years before this, so that's where I met Jamie and where we did a lot of work together in our permission-granted workshops and other things. And I am a therapist and a death doula, and so I am here to talk about death and everything that has to do with bodies and grief and everything else.
Yeah. Caroline, I'm really glad that you're here, like here on this podcast and also just like here on this planet. So my sort of introduction to Caroline was, oh my God, it was through your podcast. That was
it mine? I think my liturgist.
Well, I think, yes, technically that happened first, but our first conversation happened in podcast format. So Joan, this is a good sign for yours and Caroline's friendship because it's happening in a podcast format.
Yeah.
That was like 2018. And we have both had many evolutions since then. Also many different hair colors and different style ideations, different cities we've lived in, lifestyle orientations, family oriented. You're a mother now, like just like so much has happened. And for me, one of the most important experiences that I ever had with you, which, you know, plays into a little bit of like my relationship to death of sorts, is when we traveled together. We went to Portugal together. And I'll just say that you are probably you and Elizabeth Gilbert are the two people responsible for me waking up to the fact that I was just horrifically codependent, and that I could feel better. I could feel better, actually. And you were also the person who doulaed me during my death, literally telling me, Jamie, it feels like you're dying because you are. And I knew that you were a reliable reference and a trustworthy friend and even a trustworthy guide in that process because you yourself had walked through that, and you've always been extraordinarily honest and just deeply desirous of getting to the point. Like, let's get to the point of the truest thing that's going on here. Like, why would we waste our time? It's like the least kind thing we could be doing with one another right now. And I adore that about you. It's why you're one of the most trustworthy and safest people that I know. And when we realized that, you know, we wanted season 2 to be about death, again, that was a very quick realization. And pretty much right away, immediately after realizing that, I was like, oh shit, we got to talk to Caroline. Because I would say you're one of the people that I know that is most acquainted with death. And not just because you are a death doula and a death educator and you help people die, but also because, well, it's a both and, right? Like what feeds what, because you have really surrendered yourself to the acknowledgement of the process of death in the experience of life and truly fully living. And so I'm just really glad that you're here. I'm so glad that I get to know you and I get to be your friend. And I'm really grateful that we get to introduce you to our audience here on Experiential Anatomy. The main thing we're trying to do here, the most important thing we want to do is advocate for bodies. And that's exactly what you do through your work and your life as well. And so I'm really glad that you're here.
Thank you. I love that. When you started the sentence with you and Elizabeth Gilbert are the people who have done this most of my life. Like, what is she going to say? Like, what? Wow, this is going to get juicy. And then Coda. All right.
Yeah. Well, and also, I don't know, how many divorces might the two of you be responsible for?
Oh, wow. That's another kind of death, if we're honest.
Exactly. Yeah. And one that you and Elizabeth Gilbert are both very well acquainted with.
She more than I, but yes, hundo for sure.
Well, and you know, on that note, you told us a little bit at the top about who you are. I am really curious to just go ahead and like land this comment. Let's get straight to the point because that is what you love and that is what I love about you and I love doing that with you. So like, let's land this in death immediately. You already mentioned divorce.
Yeah.
I'm sure there have been many, many, many other deaths in your life that have gotten you to like the current expression of you. So I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about who you are and maybe even like what you do through that lens of how death has played a part in your, you know, continual becoming and unbecoming that has gotten you to this moment.
Well, I'm the oldest of 6 kids that grew up in Wisconsin. And so when it's been almost 10 years now, I realized that, oh, wow, okay, we're all going to die. Like at that point, I was still a very codependent person who hadn't started any of my own identifying what was mine to handle and what wasn't. And so I was like, okay, everyone in my family is going to die. So do we love that codependence kind of led me to death work? I don't know.
I do personally.
Every path is wonderful.
Codependence has led me to a lot of things that ultimately I am grateful I purified but kept. too. Yes.
Honestly, even when it comes to other things that I've worked on being more aware of and integrating and healing in my own life, for example, like being hypervigilant and having that be something that came from certain types of traumatic experiences. I am fully grateful for my hypervigilance when I am with someone who's dying, because I track things and I support them through things that other people are not noticing. And sometimes
holy shit, yes.
when you're working with someone who can't speak anymore or can't use certain body parts anymore, to be able to be like, oh, I know what you need right now. I can tell what you need right now. I've genuinely been like, I am so grateful for my hypervigilance.
Yes. Wow. Well, I think there's like an oldest daughter thing, and there's, I mean, same, right? It's the Venn diagram's a circle.
Yeah. But anyway, so back to the question. Oldest is 6. Like, okay, we're all so different. If something happens to one of us, what do? You know, we would all not know how to care for each other because we're all incredibly different. So then starting to do a little research, finding out about advanced directives, which I hope that both of you have done yours. Yes. Jamie, your face.
It's been on my, I'm so sorry. It's been on my to-do list for like 2 years. It just keeps getting moved towards the bottom. I'm going to do it.
Well, we're going to have an directive online party where we do them together.
I like that.
But basically discovered advanced directives where you write out your wishes. And so I got my siblings together in Los Angeles in 2017, and we all created our advanced directives. And that was my very first step into anything death related. And then I was like, wow, this is so important. There's so much I didn't even think about. Things like, what do I want done with my body? You know, when you're answering questions like, is there anyone that you don't want at your funeral? Suddenly it brings up a lot of stuff around relationships and like, ooh, is there stuff I want to heal? Is there stuff I don't want to heal? And so it was very existential. It was kind of a ceremony in itself, churning a lot of meaning and meaning making. And then that led me to, long story short, taking a death doula training course. At the time, I was a full-time photographer and lived in Los Angeles doing production and all kinds of things where I was with people all of the time. And then in 2019, got divorced after a 16-year relationship, which was my very first personal, I think, like, I died in my own body. Like, my body was still alive, but everything that I knew, everything that I was, everything that people knew about me, the people who liked me, who didn't like me, who had a problem with me, everything changed whether I wanted it to or not. Even the stuff that I didn't want, even the stuff that I was like, can I just be selective about which part? It was like, no, it's blank. It's everything starts over. And again, talking about gratitude, like, I'm not here to say everything's better on the other side. That's not what I'm trying to say. But that grief that I went through was so, I mean, it tore me, every part of me, everything that I knew, everything that made sense. And I think I spent like a month where I could barely leave the house because I was just so devastated and nothing was making sense. And that level of grief, I touch that every time I sit with someone when they're dying. When I'm sitting with someone who's dying and their children aren't even in the room because it's too much for them to see their parent in that state. And when I'm looking in the eye and saying, I'm not going anywhere, this isn't too much for me, I can touch that grief and say, like, I could get through that. That's what this is. This is the kind of grief that all you can do is be with it and witness it. You can't fix it or make it go away or do anything, but just be with someone. So again, that prepared me. Didn't realize that it was, but it did. And then right after the divorce, I thought, okay, well, this is going to be great. I'm just going to bounce right back into this new life and everything's going to be fine. And then the pandemic hit. And then I was like, just kidding. Let's go all the way. Like, the tree died and we cut it off. We cut it off base. But let's go ahead and rototill the entire field, do a full burn, do a full, like, everything.
I remember you telling me you popped a bottle of champagne to sit down and send all of our workshop attendees their money back, which was like thousands of dollars going out of your account, like the second week of the pandemic.
I think it was $15,000 I refunded in a day. was just like, I don't know if I'm going to make it anymore.
If that's not death, I don't know what is. Oh my God.
Yep.
Just all that resourcing, just like, bye, nothing I can do. Bye.
Yep. And so then from that moment, there was a little LSD involved, but I realized, okay, I've changed. The world has changed. We like at this point, it's March of 2020. We're days into lockdown. So I didn't know how long we would be in lockdown. I didn't know that COVID would last for years. I thought even at the moment it might be weeks and that we were still going to feel it and notice it. And so I felt a very, very strong, like, now is when death is my whole life's work.
Yeah.
And being with people and being with grief. And so that was when I decided to go back to school to become a therapist, to add more tools to my death work. I always say being a therapist is just a little formality so that people have something to attach to my work. Because when people hear death doula, they're kind of like, I don't know what that is. But when people hear a therapist who works with people when they're dying, people go like, oh, that's really important.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's a formality that adds credibility to my work. Therapy is not my number one work, although I love it and care deeply about it. And then grad school brought me to the Bay, where I lived with an incredible 79-year-old woman named Judith. And she taught me so much about aging and how people really feel when they're aging, when they're losing some of their autonomy in their body, when they're losing some of their things that they've been able to do since they were like 2 years old and learning how to do all these things. And then suddenly those things are being stripped away. And Judith and I became very good friends, very close, and she would speak incredibly candidly with me about how she really felt, what was really going on. And I lived with her for the final little year and a bit of her life and was with her when she died. And so she's a great teacher of my life. And that happened to be when I was 7 months pregnant when she died. So it was kind of, again, like this surreal, like life and death are happening at the same time, all the time, expanding me and everyone else around me. And so, my work now is both as a grief therapist, as a therapist. I work with people. It's like there isn't a word for it.
Yeah.
It irritates me sometimes that we don't really have a way of holding it. Like when someone says, "What's a death doula?" It's like, it's going to take me like 60 seconds to define it. Even then I'm going to do a horrible job of summarizing what it is because it's 18 different things at once. Sometimes I'm making calls to find a place for someone to live because they're not well enough to live at home because they can't go up and down stairs, but they don't want to move into a nursing home, but they don't want to die at a hospital. So I'm like calling different places, seeing where can we get them into a place where they feel at home without being at home. Sometimes it's me talking about, do you want to use medical aid in dying because you live in a state where that's legal? And then I'm going, I don't think that's legal. You can't do that. And me saying, you live in a state where you can do that. In California, you can do that. And then really being with people in the layers of things that they'd never thought of, things they're afraid of. Yeah, it's really beautiful work, and it's never the same. Sometimes it's literally sitting with someone when they're dying. Sometimes it's helping a family member with logistics after someone dies. And there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of logistics that I know you two are in different countries. So maybe Canada does a better job of supporting citizens when they die. But in America, there is there is no clear, like, 1, 2, 3, here you go. Here's what you need to do. And then you can go back to grieving because you just lost your loved one. It's like you're just grasping in the dark, trying to figure out what the hell is going on while you're also in the most, altered state of consciousness grief that you can imagine. So it's a support person for all things death and dying. And yet we don't know to value that yet.
Yeah.
Well, and I think precisely for the reason that we were talking a bit before we started recording, I think it's precisely for the reason that you named then, which is like, nobody's talking about the most obvious normal thing in the world. Like it's hard for me to even articulate right now because I have started to become a person who sees it more than I don't. And it's strange to like function in the world sometimes, which is why I try to do it as minimally as possible. It also makes me a better and more ethical body worker doing that. But it's strange sometimes to like kind of go back out into spaces where people largely aren't having just like straightforward conversations like these, or aren't maybe doing work like this, or even don't even know work like this exists. And there is this kind of feeling that like, I don't know, we're functioning as if, living as if death is not imminent, not just for ourselves, but I think most especially sometimes for the people we love. I don't know. I assume it's just different for everybody, but I will just say, I think for me, that one is way harder. Like, I don't really have much of a hang up around thinking about my own death, but the idea of preparing myself, like consciously, actually, on purpose, preparing my internal world to need to be able to both appropriately grieve, but also withstand the somatic impact of the death of the people that I allow myself to most deeply connect with in this lifetime. Like, that is living in a way where I'm holding the awareness that that is a necessary skill for me to develop to be well, means being awake to a lot. And it's very hard to be awake to all of those things in a world where like regular stuff is still just happening and we're all overstimulated, so it just, I don't know, there's just something, I mean, not something, there's many things extraordinarily profound about thinking both about the work that you're doing and exactly what you just said about like the sort of shocking absence of place for and understanding of the necessity, structural necessity, relational, yes, but like structural necessity. My mother had some health stuff a few weeks ago, and it, without getting into too much detail and taking too much time to explain it, there was just a moment where I was like, she could die sitting in a hospital waiting room. Oh, that happens to people every day. Oh my God. It was like I had not, until it came not even inches, feet away from me. She is okay and stable now. But until it came into my periphery at all, this is wild to think about. I'm 36 years old. I've never had the conscious thought that like people are dying. People are dying in ways where they're not dying with dignity. They're not dying with support. They're not dying with relationship. They're not dying with anyone around them being conscious in the direction of their death. And so, yeah, just what you're doing is vital. And of course, it's so multifaceted and complex, but I love that for you because I know that that's where you really thrive and shine and what like holds your interest. And I had a thought while you were sharing, and I can ask it now or I can ask it in a bit. Joan, if you have, some thoughts to reflect, I'm not going to forget my question. So if you have anything you'd like to share in response, please go first.
Yeah, I think I love hearing some of even like the specific details of what you offer within the death doula world, because as a physician who offers palliative care, I have not yet come across a death doula. It's still very not.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I know. And I'm like, that would be very helpful just to say. I certainly can see, certain people acting in certain pieces of that role that you described, but they often will have restrictions around them, if it's say like government funded like home care worker or care coordinator, there's like some of that, but then there's a limit to it. And there's something really beautiful about the fact that you like people choose you and get to know you, and then you're holding that journey for them, versus when it's more like a part of a system, there's more, say, turnover, and there's not choice in who would come and like be there. It's sort of who's on the shift that day, So
Sure.
I just think there's something really profound and lovely there. And it is sort of like thinking of, I like the term doula, and I'm glad that it's there because it speaks to how, like, at least where I work, like the midwifery model, which is also sort of like government funded along with like more like medical, like physician models. The thing that I think is really beautiful about the midwifery model of care is that they care for the person while pregnant, and then also come and care for the person after they are no longer pregnant, and care for the baby for the first little bit. And so hearing that part of death doula is the before, the during, and the after, like, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a place where like the traditional as in Western currently funded by a government or whatever system. I guess my piece of it as their family physician may not end as I may be the physician for some of the family, but also not necessarily. So sort of it's like suddenly everyone leaves.
Yeah.
And then there maybe there's some websites that have some checklists, I hope, but it's certainly not like someone there to hold your hand and take you through. It's sort of like, well, they were the patient and now so sorry for your loss and goodbye.
Yeah.
And that there is like this real gap there.
Wow.
So it's just beautiful to imagine what it could look like if this was a norm where people would have access to something like the services you're providing.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe that you work as a palliative care doctor and you're like, oh yeah, we don't have you.
I'm sure they may exist, but like I have not, like over the number of patients that I've worked with.
Which totally makes sense, and I hope that that's changing at the moment. I think a lot more people are feeling called to death work, and I think part of it is necessity. I mean, in America alone, there are 73 million boomers, which is the largest generation. Damn. There are going to be more people over 65 by 2030 than under 18.
Damn.
We are going to be surrounded by people who are dying. And I don't mean that in like a weird, creepy way. I mean that in a like, we need to be prepared to support them.
Yes.
And in supporting ourselves in the grief, in the finances, in the handling the logistics of even like possessions. Like that's one of the things that I work with people where I'm like, so you live in a house that you've lived in for 30 years. When are you going to handle your shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good.
My dad's basement. Yeah. Yeah. Caroline, I've thought of you many times with this because I get the sense that as my dad is nearing the end of his life, and as I am less frequently in a state of resistance and more frequently in a state of like, let's just connect over the reality of this, when I don't force it, but whenever, I can feel that he wants or needs that. I've actually noticed within him a greater interest in like selling a lot of those things in the basement, which has been really interesting. I'm not in my dad's brain or body, so I can't know for sure. And I would be happy to ask him. I just haven't yet. But from my vantage point, something shifted. The more I became open and also just regulated in the presence of conversation about death with both of my parents, I've seen some things shift within them where they're more willing to talk about it with me. They're more willing to acknowledge the inevitability. And I would guess from what I have seen and experienced in them, it's made them more mindful within their own life about like what they still have that they might want to start looking at from the vantage point of, once I'm gone, I don't want anyone else to need to deal with this. Or my dad has been a collector of things, throughout his life, like records and comic books. And he found that he located some other collectors younger than him and has sold his collection to them. And so there's just something really practical and material about that, but there's also something that feels like emotional, spiritual about that too, where he's literally starting to clean out this basement in a way that I recognize as a admission of his mortality.
That's profound. I love it.
Yeah.
Joan, I'm super curious, since I know you're the one you said you are a palliative care doctor, and so what is something like, if you're meeting someone for the first time and you are their palliative care doctor, what do you want people to know? Like, what do you empower your own patients with, or what do you wish everyone knew as a palliative care doctor?
It's a good question. So one thing I'll say is that I only provide palliative care to my own. So I'm a family doctor, like a primary care clinician. And so I actually already have a relationship with them. And then they happen to move into the death stage. So that's like the way I am happy to do it, in part because then I've had time, hopefully, to build that relationship and understand some of their values ahead of time. However, it creates its own little challenge, because like sometimes I can feel like I'm supposed to be doing the thing. It like, especially when I started out in like training, it's like I'm supposed to be doing the thing where we're pretending death doesn't exist, and we're like, don't worry, you'll feel better, and like try and make everything better. And then suddenly you do this hard pivot to like, just kidding. Now the signs are saying death's at the door.
Yep.
And like, and then you're doing a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it feels way more organic because it's like, I'm just like open to the fact of uncertainty of death at any point for anybody anyway, and more comfortable having that in the room.
Yeah.
So like whether it's a person who really is like, I am actively providing them or at least offering them the option of palliative care, whether they're ready to take it on or not, or earlier in their journey, like I wish people would, and just sort of culturally, generally be more comfortable with the notion of death and not think that speaking of death brings it to your door. Like I had recent patient encounters where someone is going to die soon-ish. I mean, no future fortune telling, but the conditions happening in their body mean that death is going to be sooner rather than later. And they really just don't want to speak of it at all. And it makes it tricky. And I honor their autonomy in finding ways around it. But also it is really, I wish there was ways to speak of it. And not like you'd mentioned before we started, like sort of in a win-lose, success-fail kind of way, like stepping away from that language completely. And just honoring the fact that like literally we're all a book with an end, you know, and we don't know how many chapters we have left. So that and sort of like a grand scale, I wish, and I'm so happy to have conversations like this that like help with that. And then more specifically, and one thing I wanted to hear you speak of in terms of as you went through the process of training and actually like literally sitting with people with death, like I think it would be helpful for people to really understand like literally what death can kind of look like and maybe feel like, but even more so, say you're sitting with someone who's dying, like not that everyone goes through the same exact stages, but that there's sort of common things about when someone's dying that often surprise people or upset them or disturb them that perhaps if we had more kind of common knowledge of, people would at least be prepared for or not panic about, because that can happen a lot too. And they're calling 911 and you're like, oh, this is, I mean, you can call if you want, but like, this is how it's supposed to go, you know? I don't know if you relate to that.
Well, I would be curious the answer in like both the short term and the long term. Because I hear, Joan, I hear in what you're asking this kind of like in like an acute moment sort of thing, like the physical. And I'm so curious about that. And I'm also curious about like when you're walking with someone and their loved ones over like a period of time, like when someone knows that they're going, like both the physical things you observe and then also like the mental, emotional changes inside of that person that maybe those of us who are, I mean, at some point, all of us, unless something, you know, happens and we go first, we're going to be invited to be some degree of present to like our parents' death. And I know talking about aging parents has become a really important part of your work and education lately. So yeah, I'm curious exactly what Joan's asking, both from the physical and the mental, emotional changes in a dying person.
Yeah, I love that as a question and as a topic because it's so practical and it is all bodies. It's just bodies. It's what they do. It's the exact same thing with death like it is with birth. You know, there's the signs and you're like, oh, you're at 7 centimeters. Oh, this is the ring of fire. Like there are all of the checkpoints that you just can like look at anyone in the room who knows the signs and go like, we know where we're at. And it's the same with death. It's exactly the same. The body's the same. The body knows what it's doing. The body's not afraid. If there are any parts of the person that are afraid, it's not their body.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think it's super beautiful and juicy to just have the conversation about how bodies die without connecting it to all the other stuff. To just be like, especially because this podcast is called Experiential Anatomy, to be like, how body die.
Love it. Yes. We love the checklists.
We do. Well, there's a couple, I think, things that come up just in mind. And part of me is like, Joan should be telling it. Like, Joan's the doctor. So I should.
No. I like, decenter myself. Okay. I center you, please.
You guys can compare your notes later and make sure they match. Yeah.
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is that there's an incredible hospice nurse named Barbara Karn who has been doing work trying to educate people on this for decades. And a lot of hospices and a lot of social workers in different hospitals hand out this little blue book. It's like 6 pages. Have you seen it, Joan?
I've definitely seen handouts, and I think I've seen a blue book, so I imagine it's probably hers.
Well, it's like a tiny little blue pamphlet. It's called Gone from My Sight, The Dying Process. Page by page, like 6 months out, 2 months out, 1 week out.
Wow.
It's empowering family members because no one tells them. And the amount of times when, like, you know, party trick, when someone goes, she's a death doula, everybody pops with their stories.
Totally.
And everybody's story is usually really hard. Like, my dad died and no one told me he was dying. Or, you know, my sister died and I was in the room and no one told me that when she started this drug that she was going to go into a sleep and that I should have said goodbye. Like, it's always that kind of thing. And I'm just like, God, I really want people to know. I want these conversations to happen. So Barbara Carnes, she, you know, has really, really beautiful little books if anybody feels called to actually deep dive into this. But a couple of the things in terms of just the practical logistics of bodies, typically months out, someone starts sleeping a lot more. You know, it's just the slow pull away from this life, the slow of a lot of times they eat less and less and their family starts panicking and being like, no, we need you to eat. We need you to eat. And I'm like, their body is saying they don't need that anymore. Their organs are saying, I am shutting down.
I'm finished.
Yeah, I don't need to shut more energy, more protein, more anything. I'm trying to unwind.
Yeah.
Very slow. And so it's actually counterproductive and almost harder on them to force feed someone who's saying they don't want to eat. And that's a really hard thing for people who love them and who have their own logical mind saying, like, that means they're going to die. And it's like, well, they are, but not because of starvation. That's not the connection. So more sleep, less food. Then there starts to be oftentimes this very liminal space where people often get visitations from past loved ones who've died, even pets. Oftentimes they see them in the room. Sometimes they sit up and start talking to them. And it's usually in the last week of someone's life. But it's very common.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful thinking. I mean, I'm not trying to, like, you know, rain on anybody's parade here, but like for me, I hear them like, what a beautiful thing the mind creates. Like I think it's probably real and also, you know, sure. But I think that's just, wow. I don't even really know how to explain. I woke up at 2:30 a.m. local time. So, but I also think it's fun to like experience this conversation this way because that is sort of an unexplainable phenomenon. The fact that it's a through line and you literally can say that happens about a week. Like this is a thing humans are doing, like bringing up, some part of us is bringing up like the living beings that mattered to us, like while we were alive in our bodies because we want them there with us. And like, you're telling me that's a sign of death. That is gorgeous. I'm sorry. I just love that. Please keep going.
So good.
Joan, have you seen that in your work?
You know, see, this is like, I needed to hear what you had to say because some of the pieces, like when I was trained, I never has been trained about that. And honestly, I'm looking back and because of some of the nature of like how often I can or can't see people, like I want to ask that now. I haven't heard that. Yeah. And I imagine, honestly, like say that was happening in a hospital setting, that would be perceived as like, they're having hallucinations. Sure. Let's medicalize. Like I can see how the medicalized version of that wouldn't view it in the beautiful way you just did it, which is like liminal space. It's part of it. Or like
catalog it as data like that too.
Yeah. Like, so I was like, I know I'm going to learn things from you, Caroline. So I'm so glad that you're sharing. The feeding one, for sure, it comes up because then physicians and like clinicians can be put in this real ethical dilemma where sometimes the patient, but usually it's the family's like, we have to do IVs, we have to do feeding tubes. And you're like, this is probably not even going to prolong life, actually.
Yeah.
But it is going to potentially cause suffering. And it's a common ethical trickiness because people don't, and they think that you're starving them, you're making them die of thirst. But that's the way you described it is really beautiful, actually. So,
well, and that's why having your advance directive, so that you're really clear about your wishes while you're able to, have a medical proxy who's saying, sorry, this is what she wanted.
Yeah. Don't force feed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty helpful. But another one that sometimes, is often really common, which is called terminal agitation, which is like kind of like this restlessness that happens. And I can remember working with someone when they were dying, and she was still, present enough to be like, what is happening? Like, why am I feeling like this? And I was like, I think, and everybody can say what they want to say that it is, but rather than seeing it as some sort of like suffering, in the same way that when we are with, I've given birth, so I'll say when I was with myself giving birth, it's like this, like, there's like a thing that's happening that's really, really big, and it's outside of our human conscious awareness, where we're going, I know exactly what's happening, and this is how it's happening, and I'm making it happen. We are dipping into the mystery, out of our control. And I think when terminal agitation happens, I think it's the opposite of birth. Rather than the soul coming into the body, it's kind of pulling apart of like, the body is letting go of the thing that was alive. That's what I think.
I'm obsessed with that.
I agree.
So
Great.
I love that.
Holy
That's
shit.
Beautiful.
Wow.
You're just like, co-sign. Yep. Got it.
Yeah.
It makes more sense than anything else.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Well, anyway, so terminal agitation is another one. But yeah, it's really, I won't keep going on. I will say, if anybody's really interested in this, a new documentary just came out last year. It is gorgeous, and it is very hard to watch. It's called The Last Ecstatic Days. And it's a young man who's in his 30s who is very, very, very healthy, like a yogi, doing all of the things with his body, and gets a brain tumor and decides to film the process, including his death. And it's gorgeous and excruciating at the same time, because all of the things that I just said, all of the little like, this thing that happens in death, you get to see it. And no one shows real death in the movies.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's when I mentioned Barbara Connor, the nurse. She even sells a T-shirt that says, like, people don't die like they die in the movies.
They don't birth like they birth in the movies either.
No.
Or have sex, or have
many things.
Anything having to do with bodies.
Yeah.
That's the through line. Yeah.
So the documentary is called The Last Ecstatic Days. And like I said, it's not like a, Friday night, grab your popcorn, but it's gorgeous and really profound when it comes to understanding the body and what happens.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say, and like the practical, I wish people knew this, is that often the body actually needs a little help, like getting right over it. Like, it is a very slow process oftentimes. If it's not something that's very acute, if it's like a car accident, or even if it's something like cancer, sometimes that can go faster. But often, very often, it takes a very, 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 very long time. And sometimes people want to help it along, and they're like, I'm done sitting here. It's maybe a little bit like a C-section, where you're kind of like, what do we do to
move this along? Yeah.
And so a lot of times people will voluntarily stop eating and drinking altogether, including water, which is very intense. It's called VSED in America. A lot of people will choose VSED ultimately, and that can take anywhere from 2 to 10 days for the body to fully die. And that is hard. That is really hard. So I'm a huge advocate for legalized medical assistance in stages of dying. And Medical aid in dying is legal in 13 states in the US. I think it's legal in Canada.
Yeah, it's legal across Canada.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Canada actually legalized it for even more stuff.
We just like go ham. Yeah. But I think it was legal in certain states before it was legal in Canada. Like it became legal. Like I graduated medical school, started practicing, and then it became legal. Like, so it's just in the past 10 years. I forget exactly when, but I love it.
Yeah. So that is legal. And again, I want people to know that because a lot of times they don't know that that's a thing because no one talks about it. So no one knows.
Yeah.
But if there's a terminal diagnosis with 6 or less months expected that someone will live, then they can go through a 2-week long process. At least this is in America. I'm not sure what it is in Canada, but you have to get a diagnosis. Then you have to talk to a doctor, tell them you want it. Then you have to talk to a psychiatrist and a therapist. There are all these checks and balances to make sure that no one's pressuring you to do it, that you're not doing it because you feel like a burden to your family, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So it takes 2 weeks, which is another thing that a lot of people wait until the minute they want it. And then I'm like, well, you got 2 weeks to wait. So even though it's legal in 13 states, and if this is not interesting, you just take it out of the podcast, by the way. And like, I don't know.
It's all interesting is the thing.
That's good.
But if you're not in one of the 13 states where it's legal, you can also go to Portland. You don't have to be a resident to use medical aid in dying there. You do have to still have a terminal diagnosis, but you don't have to, live in California or one of these rural states.
I'm feeling really grateful for the service you just provided. Like, I just learned so much while you were sharing. I was like, this was an excellent idea. Caroline here and having this conversation. Wow, thank you for that. We need to take a little bit of a break. And then I have a few final things I'd love to dig into with you. The first one being something you mentioned a little bit ago about how the body is not afraid of death.
Yeah.
So I want to jump back in there and just let you say everything you most deeply believe about that subject when we come back from our break. So let's do that, friends. If you'd like to connect with us, we invite you to join us on Substack.
exanatomy.substack.com is the home for the Experiential Anatomy podcast. It's the place to stay up to date and never miss an episode, even if you're taking a break from social media.
You can subscribe for free, and you can contribute to the sustainable creation of these conversations by upgrading to a paid subscription. Paid subscribers get access to special content like audience Q&As, bonus episodes, and other supportive materials that we've created along the way.
We love it there, and we hope you will too. Welcome back, everyone, especially Jamie and Caroline. We were just talking on the break about how we're having such a good time talking about death, which is not weird to me, and it's probably not weird to any of you, but perhaps others in our lives would be like, that's not something I can imagine having a good time talking about. But it is a good time. So thank you for everything you've already shared, Caroline. I think having your perspective, I hope everyone is getting as much out of it as I personally am. So then, Jamie, you're going to ask Caroline a question before we went on break.
Yeah. I've got a couple, just 2 things that I'd love to kind of round this conversation out with. And the first one is, like I mentioned before we went on the break, I really, truly just want to hear you, literally just hear you riff on what you have learned about this reality that the body is not afraid of death. How you've witnessed that, how you have felt that to be true in your direct lived experience, just whatever it is that you want to say about that and why it is that you believe that. I would just love to hear that. And I would love for that to go out to everyone listening to this too.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I have an answer that comes to mind, but then I also feel like more than that, I have questions that I want to, that it's more, to me, it's a dialogue, it's a conversation about something that we don't know. There are things that we do and then things that we don't. And so, for me personally, I'll say, I think my meditation practice, my relationship with my body, and also psychedelics have been really meaningful in me connecting with how much my body is aware that she is going to die all the time.
Yep.
That doesn't freak her out at all. The part of my lizard brain that goes, like the part of my nervous system that goes like danger, danger, that gets activated sometimes. And then the part of me that is, we might call my ego, that says like, well, wait a second, how am I going to be remembered? And I am not done being here. And how do people think about me? And did I make it money? And all of these things. That part of me is like not into death. But my actual body, this anatomy, is just like, bitch, we've been doing that. Like my cells, I have been regenerating,
always dying
all the time.
Yes.
Every 7 years, I'm basically a whole new person anyway. So I had this very, I'll say this because I know Jamie can hang with this, and I'm more curious about what your response is than the actual story. But when I used to own an A-frame in Palm Springs that Jamie and I used to spend many days.
I miss it.
Many naked afternoons dancing around the pool.
In 114-degree full sunshine, but then you get in the shade. It feels excellent.
It was beautiful. It was a great part of my life. That died.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of death, still grieving it, actually.
Oh, occasionally I just go like, wow, I got to live that life. And that was fun.
Yeah.
And it
was so
done.
good.
It's done. So that was something that I would enjoy psychedelics there fairly often. And one time I was deep in a journey with psilocybin, and I was talking to my body deep in my relationship with my body. And I was like, so are you afraid to die? And my body was like, no, not at all. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a surprise.
That's kind of a surprise.
I was like, wow, I'm a little shocked by that. And then I was like, I was pushing it because I wanted to test it.
No.
I mean, this was like years ago, and I should have probably revisited my journal to see exactly what I wrote and exactly, the wording of it. But the gist of it was me going like, how can I trust you? How can I trust that you know what you're doing? And my body was like, well, I actually know what this is. Like I'm a part of the thing that I came here with a very clear plan, and like I'm a part of it. So I know more than you do. And I was like, okay, I believe that because like you know how to like make a baby and my brain doesn't. Like my brain wouldn't have a clue. And even if I gave my brain a salad and said, can you turn this into energy and poop? My brain would be like, no, I can't. So my body is really smart. And my body just was like, yeah, no, I actually know what I'm doing. And I actually am really deep in cahoots with like a bigger plan. And so you kind of just need to trust me. Mm-hmm. This is like if you've ever, done psychedelics, you'll hear this and be like, wow, she was on drugs. That's really funny. But it was profound to me.
Oh, it's profound.
Oh no, I understand. Yeah.
So this is the drug part, the part where I was like, oh my God, I'm on drugs. I love it. I was like, can you give me any proof? Can you give me any proof that I can really trust? And my body was like, look at your fingers. Look at the shapes in your fingerprints. You have a completely unique mark that I made with the person, with the everything that put you here. And so you got to trust me because like, I know what's up.
Did you do that? I did that.
Yeah.
Which of us did that?
Yep.
Yeah. And so my body was just like, you need to just chill, that I'm good. Yeah. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm here to do. So just kind of let go and handle the part of you that doesn't want this, because it's not me. I'm good. So that's my answer.
God damn. I'm so glad I asked that question.
I love that whole conversation with your body. Like, I just think that's so beautiful. And I mean, one way to break down why don't we talk about death is just that we've been deeply conditioned to mistrust our bodies. So like that was like, how can I trust you? Right? Like, I don't know that a kid says, can I trust my body? Like, it's the relationship hasn't been fractured yet in the way that it gets fractured, Yeah. And I just think that's so profound to like have that rebuilt for for you. And your fingerprints is a reminder. That's
yeah.
so
Yeah. That it's like, and you too have your own unique fingerprint. Every single one of us does. And that just is such a reminder that our body is intelligent. Our body is brilliant. And whether you want to say it's just because your body is, or whether you want to say that's because it's in relationship with something else, something bigger, something greater, whatever, however you want to hold it, that is something we can align on. Your body is uniquely intelligent.
Yes.
Period.
First of all, relatable. When you said you asked for proof, I was like, it's about to be the most like mundane sounding thing, like fingerprints. That's your, but when you're in that space, because it isn't actually mundane, that's the thing. Because the way that you just described what is so worth marveling about in the direction of the body, that is more real than, it reminds me of that, that I think it's, who was it? Some comedian, whatever, who has that bit about like when people are getting, and maybe because I flew on a plane today and I'm always just like glued to the window. I'm like, I get to see the earth from above. And like, I've flown so many times, but it's never lost on me. But that comedian who has that bit about like when people get upset about the Wi-Fi not working and this metal tube and the Louis C.K. That's right. Yeah. I feel like that, like I see your psilocybin and I will match you in the psilocybin. When I was in London, our trip, we were in limbo because you were death dueling for one of your relatives. Caroline, this taught me so much. Just like I was waiting on you, you were waiting on that button. It was just like, man, that was beautiful. Like we were all, and it felt sacred. Like it gave my waiting a purpose, and that was such medicine for me. To just learn how to surrender more. But
I forgot about that small detail.
Totally. Yes, I know. Brilliant. And when we were in Portugal together, I remember we were in Kewen's bathroom and you told me about Judith for the first time.
Oh, Judith.
Yes.
Wow.
And you were like, I think I'm going to live with this 79-year-old woman. And I was like, do it. And like, it's wild to just realize that she was always a member of your family. And like, that was it's really beautiful. Anyway, April of that year of 2022, I was still in my every 3 months I do a full dose experience. And I now know that one of the main things that was going on there with that like 3-year container is my body was getting me on board with the fact that I came here to be a mother. And so a lot needed to be reprogrammed regarding my aversion to that process and that becoming in myriad ways. But one of the things that happened on that trip when I was in London, that psychedelic journey, full dose of psilocybin, I remember having this awareness that I was, it's London, it's busy out there. If I were to, for some reason, walk out on the street, the state I was in at that moment, just in such awe and wonder regarding bodies and the fact that like bodies build bodies and like that's the only, we don't grow in a lab. We don't, it's like, this is crazy actually. This is miraculous. And it's the most normal thing in the world because it's the only thing that's happening. I had this awareness that I was like, if I in this state were to go out on the street right now and encounter another human being, which inevitably I would because it's London, I wouldn't be able to, I would fall at their feet weeping. I wouldn't be able to help it. Because this miracle, the miracle of, sure, the human experience, but specifically the body, I was just enamored. And that was the beginning of my kind of alignment, my coming into integrity about the fact that like, oh, I want to participate in that because for so many years I thought that was not for me. I really think there's something specific about psilocybin and bodies. I don't need to get into that now, but I'm not surprised that this was you were like, can you give me proof? And you went back to your body. The body is the proof of this, actually, just the brilliance of the body.
Very, very deep intelligence around death, how to do it, what's happening. I even listen to my body sometimes when I'm helping someone die and say, what does their body need for them to be able to relax?
You mentioned a story before we started recording that I'm glad you said this because speaking of psychedelics, there was a situation where your body supported you and supporting another body by like making you aware of what was going on within you. Could you tell that?
Sure. First of all, it sounds like all I do is drugs and
no.
And just a note to my dad, I don't. That's not true. And
You do many things.
I know. He's a sweet, sweet person. He's so concerned because I'm so public about my advocacy for psychedelic assisted therapy.
Yeah.
He says, like, are you bored? Like, do you need a hobby? Are you
This is my
I'm like,
hobby.
no.
Yeah,
This is actually like
fine.
therapy. It's like deep work, and it's really beautiful. So anyway, so this is going back a couple of years now, and I was working with someone who was dying, and they had had a very long, drawn out illness, and they were very, very, very weak, and they were so ready for their body to let go. And they kept every single day when I would be with them, they would say, I'm ready. I'm really ready. And they really wanted to just die in their sleep. And that was every single day. That was like, I woke up again. I'm really disappointed. I'm ready to go. And there were some interesting dynamics going on in the home and just relationally with different people. And I was like, okay, I got to tap, like, what is going on for this person with their journey? And so I went home. It wasn't on the job. I went home and in my own time, participated in some psychedelic assistance, and immediately was just like, okay, body, you are talking to their body the whole time. Like, that's the thing that I think is so wild. Like, when we sit next to each other in like a coffee shop or in a bus, or when we're sleeping next to our partner or whatever else, our bodies are just going like, hey, psst, psst,
yes.
Hey.
Yes. And as a body worker now, my job is to turn that on, tune into that. Most of the time moving through the world, if you're a person who's like clued into this, it's actually more healthy for you to like kind of turn the volume down on that. So supporting people in death, working on people's back. When you on purpose turn that up, holy shit, it's magic.
Yeah.
It's magical.
Yeah. And I've gotten better and better, like you have, in body work, to be able to just turn it up without psychedelics, because it is a volume button. You go like, oh, I know where that is, and now I just turn it up and I don't need it. But this was earlier on, this was years ago, and I was like, why are they stuck? Like, something is going on. So in this altered state, I was able to just ask my body, okay, what do they need? What's going on here? And the way that my body had the exact formula and answer, and was like, this is what's going on. This is what's being felt. This is what they need in order to feel. They need to be able to relax. They need to be able to relax. Here's what you need to do. Here's what, and literally my body was like, if you do these things 3 days, on the third night. And I was like, okay. And it was like, it was almost like I couldn't believe it because it was so wild. But then I was like, of course.
Well, and that brings me on some level to my final question that I actually have for you and Joan, which was the question that I thought of earlier. Because as you tell this story, I mean, one of the things you just mentioned was the fact that this was taking a while. And so I can imagine with this person, you were supporting them to some degree prior to maybe the active dying process. And then you're supporting them in this unexpectedly prolonged active dying process. And your primary role, I don't even want to say job, but role, for however long that takes, is to be surrendered and present, to like that body to body degree of presence. And I know it. And so I know that there is something deeply connective, profoundly human that's happening there. And I had the thought just a couple of days ago working on one of my clients, and they were on my table, very much alive. But yet I had this moment where I suddenly realized, like, this person at some point, they will die. And so will everyone else I ever touch in this capacity. And it really, it brought a lot of reverence up in me. And I don't even work, directly with death. You do, Joan, you do as well. And Joan, even for you, I mean, you're people's family doctor, that when they're your patient, long-term patient, you are willing to help them die. I am so curious for both of you. what does that feel like in your body? Because if you're doing it the way that I know, I don't want to say right or wrong, but both of you have so much integrity and presence. And so if you're doing it in the way that both of you want to show up to your whole life and to your whole work, you're right there with them. And then they're gone. Yeah. And you went with them somewhere that probably, definitely, nobody else was going, capable, willing, whatever. But because nobody else did, you were there. And maybe not nobody, but to the degree that you were supporting this person up to that final moment. What happens? What have you noticed about what happens in your soma, in your lived experience? Like how have you noticed that to collect within you? What have your practices become about trying to lovingly and attentively clear out some of the ways in which that has collected, while also, I don't know, not like the next time you do it, not bringing in any anticipation of the way it could feel or how it could hurt? I'm fascinated by the somatic impact of being a person who helps people leave their bodies at close range, close up, like closer than most people could imagine. So I'm curious what that has been like for both of you.
Yeah. Joan, do you want to go first?
I mean, my journey to be more like intimate and aware and connected to my body has happened after I was already a doctor. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And as I've spoken of before, like the process of becoming a physician exacerbated distancing myself from my body, because like that's how I really feel like the dominant culture like conditions you to do, is to not notice your body and move on to the next person. Like I think about like little baby doctor, like med student on the wards where people, you know, are dying quite regularly in hospitals. And it's like, move on to the next. Like it's so, you could say industrialized, or, you know, like, so reflecting on sort of even just the grief of that, and that being the environment in which you're like learning, and that it's not in a context where you're given any amount of space to consider your own body, as well as, and the impact that also has on the bodies that are meant to be like recovering and healing or dying with dignity.
Yeah.
And so now that I feel like I'm definitely, and continue to be on a journey of connecting more with my body, when I can be still and present with the person, you know, it's some of the times I feel the most alive is like a part of it, you know? So that's like a major theme. Like I can think of a patient where I got to be my patient who I'd been with for a long time. And then I was at their bedside when they actually had medical assistance in dying. And I was pregnant at the time.
Wow.
And it was in the middle of COVID. It was like the first lockdown. It was like maybe May 2020 or something. So there was just layers of really feeling my body and feeling this little life growing in me, and then witnessing absolutely just the most beautiful, stunning death I've ever witnessed, in that it was so on their terms, and it had just like so many beautiful elements. And so that is one of my most, like, I still can feel the memory of that, because I was so present in it, in part because I was more connected with my body at that time. And just like the stark almost contrast, like that's the main somatic experience, is like I felt very alive and connected to my aliveness in the presence of watching someone die.
Wow.
So that's sort of the dominant sensation I've experienced. And then trying to also connect to that when patients are not actively dying, but are at a state of reckoning with their death or with disability. And I find I can show up to those conversations best when I'm connected in that same way of like, it within my own aliveness, can we hold the space for how your body's not afraid to die, like that thing.
Yes. And
my medical conditioning can get in the way, where then I can go back into like, oh, let's just pretend, or what am I supposed to be doing here? So I'll name, like, I have multiple somatic experiences running in me at any given time. But when I feel at my best is when I feel the least like a doctor, and instead just as like a body to body, human to human. And those are it's the most profound thing, honestly. It's one of the most, my favorite one of my favorite parts, certainly, of being a physician is being in spaces and having those experiences with folks. So
that's beautiful.
How about you, Caroline?
It's so similar to birth for me. It's so similar to, and there's so many words that people use where it's like, the veil is thin, and which I'm like, I say it like it's a throwaway phrase. It's not. It's very, it's very, very significant phrase, but that's true. Whatever that means or feels like.
Yeah.
It's a threshold where there's either someone coming in or someone going out, and it's being right next to that existential doorway where you're just kind of like, oh my God, what is happening? And I'm saying that with a smile on my face. I also work with people who are in the deepest grief of their life. Oftentimes, I work as a therapist with someone after the loss of their child. It's not like a woo, like a roller coaster of excitement all the time. Yep. So I want to be really clear. It's not like every death is the same where there's this like one experience. Bodies are going to body, which means that sometimes they die when we don't want them to. And that brings a very different flavor and experience to being with death. However, I will say, even being with death when the person wouldn't have chosen to die then, or their loved ones weren't ready for them to go, or whatever the experience might be, I would say there is still this adrenaline that's just like a little bit of a whoa, like a racing of presence of like, okay, I'm really, really here. I am, and maybe it's partly even my body going like, oh wow, I'm going to sit up a little taller while I'm still here. I'm going to really take this in while I'm still here. I'm going to really look at this tree while I'm still here. And to that point, like you said before, Jamie, about being here to become a mother and me making so many connections between birth and death, having a 16-month-old son, so much of life now is around getting to see the world that he's seeing for the very first time and getting to remember how incredible it is in the way that you said, like walking around London, weeping at people's feet because of this experience that we get to be in.
Yeah.
It's bananas. It's insane. It's psychedelic every single day, even without a substance in us. Like we are here on screens at the very same moment, looking at each other, talking about something that we go, well, we know it's going to happen. We know a few parts about it. We know probably 3% of like the 97% that's going on. And also after this, we get to go eat dinner and taste food
and hug people we love and sleep. Sleep is wonderful. I love sleep. It feels so good. We get to go to, and then we get to wake up from sleep, and then we get,
it's completely insane. Like every single morning, my son and I, Moses and I will like go out into the door and open the door and we go, good morning, trees. Every day.
So
and
good.
We both laugh, but it's so real. I'm like, they're alive too, dude. Like they are alive, and it might be a bit of a different experience, but they are also alive. And so I would say in summary, or not in summary, but like kind of the cherry on top of this for me is death work creates the meaning and the richness of my life. It doesn't make it more depressing or sad or morbid, or some of my loved ones that shall remain nameless who say, yeah, but we're supposed to hate death because it's a bad thing that takes us away. And I'm like, well, if that's how you hold it, I understand. And there is a lot to grieve.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to discredit any of that. Very, very much so the opposite. But I am saying the more that I expand into the aliveness of this body and being here, the more that I can be present with the dyingness of it. The dyingness of this body is what gives it shape. I wasn't going to die, if this body was going to go forever, I don't know. I don't know if it would have the same sparkle and oomph that it does, knowing that there is an ending to it.
Yes, and I've learned so much of that from you and from your comfortability with acknowledging the reality of death. And you have been such a beautiful teacher for me, both in direct education at moments, but mostly just by the way you live and how fully you live. I'm not surprised at all, though I am very delighted to hear that story about you and Moses every morning with the trees, but that is congruent. That sounds like you. And God, I'm just so grateful that Joan and I got to have this conversation with you. I'd love that in the answer to that question, both of you essentially said like greater aliveness, just brilliant, beautiful, perfect. And before we wrap up, when we close out our episodes, we switch back and forth. Joan and I switch back and forth to sort of like send love, appreciation, like a dedication, like dedicating this episode to like a part of your body. So we'd love to invite you to answer that question as we close out today. What part of your body today, in this moment right now, are you feeling like you would like to extend gratitude, appreciation, celebration in the direction of?
That's a sweet question. Wow, yeah. I think the thing that comes to mind is my cheeks in this moment. I'm really grateful that I get to smile and that I get to hold food inside of them. And also, I think that it's really funny that our entire face and all of our facial expressions happen here. Like if you look at a skeleton, it's like there's none of that. You can't, like, even if a skeleton was like moving its teeth open and closed, you'd be like, is it chewing, laughing, singing? I don't know. And so this little squishy little fat pockets that I worked so hard to gouache us, but truly, I'm just really grateful that they're here. So
this is why we asked the question. That's a great answer.
I just made it up on the spot. It was true.
Well, so do we every time. You are our people. We are your people. But we knew that already.
Also, thank you for what you said. I know this isn't like about, talking about each other nonstop, but I really am grateful that you said that. And also, so much of your work with bodies has influenced mine and really was so much of what I took into death work with me at the very beginning, because you were already a student of bodies. And so I'm really grateful that so much of our work has crossed over and kind of braided itself together in moments and then kind of gone off and done its own thing and then still touches and in the most profound moments. And it feels like I might not see you for 3 years or however long it's been, but just picking up right back where we left off and going like, wow, look at what you've been learning. It's really incredible. And I totally love exactly what you're sharing, that I get to learn from it as well. So it's really special to get to be here and to also meet you, Joan.
It was so good to meet you.
Thank you, Caroline. I do always feel like we are running in tandem, and the expression of it looks different, but I'm so grateful for that too. And Joan is also a person that I feel like I'm running in tandem with. So it's been a delight to introduce the two of you. Anything you'd like to say to close out, Joan?
Just thank you, Caroline. Thank you for everything that you shared. You are so cool, and I am so happy that I got to meet you. I really love hearing how people who haven't been medicalized speak about bodies. And I think it's really essential. Like, actually, something like some of our audience are folks that are non-medical, and then they get a certain thing out of it, especially maybe me being here, but like also there's a whole portion of the audience that are medical. And I think that the way that both of you talk about bodies without the lens of having to say it in this medicalized way, but still speaking of the truth of bodies is like really important. And it's like vitamins for me. It's so nourishing. So I thank you for the language that you've offered to me and to those listening that work in healthcare, because it's so important. So thank you so much.
Caroline, where can people find you, find your work, connect with you? And what are the main ways that people can work with you if they're interested in that?
Well, I'm on Instagram as How Caroline Carolines. That's my personal Instagram. If you want to email me, my email address is carolineisdying@gmail.com.
The best.
So excellent.
And then I also have more specific to death work. I have TikTok and Instagram as death.ed. It's like more, what is a death doula kind of reels, which I'm starting to film a lot more of those. So there will be more going up soon.
Oh, great.
So yeah, follow along if you just want to know more about death and dying and death doulas and all that fun stuff. Also the therapy side of it, because I do talk about that a lot too. Yeah, any sort of one-on-one work around either grief therapy or end-of-life planning or just reach out to me.
Great. Amazing. Thank you so much, Caroline.
This is Experiential Anatomy. Thanks for listening. I'm Joan Chan.
And I'm Jamie Lee Finch. Experiential Anatomy is co-hosted and created by us.
Amber Wyndham is the editor. Julia Wyndham is the supervising producer.
Senior producer is Elizabeth Wyndham. Aaron Beatty leads our community management.
Our theme music is Park Pier 3 by G's Guy.
If you have any thoughts, questions, or stories to share about this week's episode, email us at exanatomy@gmail.com.
Please follow, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember to join us over at exanatomy.substack.com.
Experiential Anatomy is produced by Windhaven Productions.
I've got that little warm dew, which is kind of nice. It's like,
you look so lovely.
Good. You're glowing.